Welcome to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be. Join us on a journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and inspiration as we explore the world of leadership and personal growth. In each episode, we will explore the art and science of effective leadership, bringing you insights, stories, and strategies from experts and thought leaders across various industries. And now your hosts, Dawn Marie Bornhammer, Maisha B. Hoy, Janelle E. Taylor, and Dr. Sharon H. Porter. Welcome to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be as you lead, empower, inspire, and achieve. I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter, Editor-in-Chief of Vision and Purpose Lifestyle Magazine.
I'm Maisha Hoy, CEO of PSHG LLC, which manages MaishaLemonadeStand.com, Cuba, a Black-owned brand marketplace, and Customer First Marketing.
And I am Janelle Taylor, CEO and founder of the JTOA Corporation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dawn Bornheimer. I am the founder and Chief Impact Officer for Mission Inspired Consulting.
And we are excited to welcome Dr. Tara Shollenberger as our guest for this episode. She is a seasoned professional in the field of higher education with 18 years of experience. She began her academic journey at Franklin Pierce College, where she earned her bachelor's degree in psychology. She then pursued her passion for sport and psychology by earning a master's degree in sports psychology from Texas Tech University. In 2014, she completed her doctorate in education at North Carolina State University. We want to give a huge welcome to Dr. Shollenberger. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We are super excited to have you. You are hailing from the great state of North Carolina, currently working at High Point University. I remember when it was High Point College, so I'm excited about the growth of that. So just really excited that you are here. And I really want to start the conversation about mentorship and sponsorship. It has been proven that it's been impactful in supporting the career advancement of women in leadership. And I want to hear, what is your experience in mentorship and or sponsorship as it has played in the role of your trajectory in higher education?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I was interviewing someone the other day and they said something profound, and I kind of had to think about it and sit in that space for a little bit. But mentorship, I could have done better if I did a better job of advocating for myself and asking for mentors and really seeking out those relationships. I have mentors. Most of them are men, mostly because the positions in which I aspire to be are held by men. So a lot of my mentors are men, and they're great and uplifting and have really sponsored me, said my name in spaces that needed to be said, and really advocated for me. I didn't have a lot of opportunity to have female mentors throughout the career. A lot of my professors were men as well. And I just think back, and I was pretty shy as an undergrad, and wasn't until I kind of moved into my space as a graduate student that I really began to kind of come out of that shell and really ask more and intentionally seek those relationships. And so I kind of look back and it's always like, oh, I wish I could have done more.
I think that's so important because I don't think that we always speak up when we need to about that, because I feel the exact same way as you, that you didn't really have them out there, but did you really ask for them? And I would say no for myself as well. So I think that's, a very wonderful key takeaway that our listeners can take away, that you speak up if you need a mentor or even a sponsor. So thank you for that candid response. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. T. It's Maisha again.
Yes.
So I love that you are now advocating for women And I saw that you're writing a book that I want to hear more about, the disruptors, women in
Yes.
higher education. And I'm wondering in this conversation, we recently had Dr. Kendra Bass and Kelly P. Horner, who has a whole Lucy leadership project. And if you haven't contacted them, I think they'd be great for your book because there are disruptors in education. But tell us more about the book, why you decided to do it. Does it lean back into what you just said about you not speaking up for yourself? Give us more information about that.
No, thank you for asking. So yeah, I'm working on a project that's called Disruptors Women in Higher Education. And it really started out, I'm a writer by nature. When I was working in student affairs, my hobby was writing fiction novels. So I have several fiction novels written, and that was kind of my way to de-stress from all the things that bubble up when you work in student affairs on a college campus. And so coming into the academic side, I was like, how can I like marry my two passions, which is definitely women in higher ed and then writing. And so I kind of had drinks with several women who I respect in the field, and we were kind of brainstorming, and this talk of disruptors came up. And initially it was all disruptors, but when I really sat and thought about it, I was like, I want to do something that's more authentic to me and that will seem natural for me to do. If I'm out there interviewing leaders in higher ed that are maybe don't look like me or a different gender or occupy different spaces, I was like, I don't know how natural that will feel. And so I really set out on this journey to talk to women in higher ed. And when I was thinking about it, us being in certain spaces just disrupts what higher ed started out to be. Women make up 65% of the workforce in higher ed, but we only represent 1 to 2% of those upper fields. So really looking at what can we do to get ourselves into those spaces and our voices heard. And I grew up watching Inside the Actors Studio. I don't know if anyone else knows that show with James Lipton.
I love that show. That
So,
is the best show about the backstory to being an actor.
Yes, that is the best way to describe it. And so that's what I framed these interviews that I'm having with women. I've interviewed 35 women so far in higher ed. And so it really starts with, let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? And so we talk about how the emphasis was on education as they grow up, where they went to school and their journey. And then I get into like leadership questions, inclusivity questions, how do they change culture and challenge norms. And then I have some just fill in the blank type questions. And then like I have my 5, like I like to say my like 5 fast facts. I didn't want to copy Mr. Lipton at all, but they're kind of like one of my favorite questions is what is a book you wish everyone would read, right? And so just being able to have those dialogues. And I thought that initially interviewing everyone would be the hardest part because getting people to agree to the study. And now as I'm doing this, I think the writing is going to be harder because everyone's story is so unique and inspiring, and the grit and determination that everyone has had to overcome. Some people were homeless. Some people were told they should just go on and be a hairdresser. One woman was the first African-American woman in her K through 12 system. And so that's what she had to overcome in her journey to higher ed. And so everyone's story has been impactful, and I've learned so much from it. So I'm excited to continue to collect these stories and then somehow try to do them justice.
Well, we can't wait to read it. So make sure you come back to the podcast when you have it published.
Dr. Tara, you have chaired the threat assessment team. I want to know what that is on campus. But as you're overseeing these community standards for fraternities and sorority life, when you chair the threat assessment, now I'm interested, and when I think of threat assessment and standards, I'm thinking order, I'm thinking regulations and mandates. So as you teach in the doctorate program track for higher education, how do you incorporate the community standards in your curriculum teaching philosophy, which is a free and fluid, curriculum? So I'd be happy to hear what that contrast is.
Yeah, so when I was getting ready to graduate with my doctorate program, I was seeking a new opportunity, and I had my former supervisor came up to me and said, "We have a director of community standards position open. You should apply. It will be fun," were her infamous last words. "It will be fun." And I didn't initially think it would be a good fit because I'm not a confrontational person. And to me, community standards at that time meant confrontation. It meant like butting up against people, always like having to enforce these policies. And while community standards is enforcing policy, it was much different than I ever anticipated, because you still form relationships, you're still informing things. And I think over time, while working in that space, I had to remember that these college age students, for example, when having a conversation about an alcohol violation or something, it's their first time. I get older every year, but they're always 18. Like the freshman class is always 18, right? So they're going through it for the first time. And so remembering that there is an empathy and there's a way to deliver things that kind of brings it where you're still mentoring and you're helping students. I mean, it is a thankless job. Not many people come back and thank their community standards person for "thank you for holding me accountable" and all these things. But it was really shaped who I am today. And I think without that role, I would not have the background experience I have to teach my students in the doctorate program about things to expect and different scenarios. The threat assessment team specifically is a passion of mine. I think that campuses, they do so much work to keep campuses safe. It's not a foolproof. They're never going to prevent all violence that comes onto campus, but they do so much work that prevents future violence, and it can't be quantified, right? Because you don't know who the next person is that's going to cause violence. All you have are these little behavior points that you can intervene at to hopefully redirect someone's anger, sadness, mistrust, whatever that is. And so I just have such a passion for that work and trying to keep our campuses safer. I'm actually working with a group right now that's lobbying a bill for the North Carolina State Senate about threat assessment teams in higher ed in North Carolina. So it's work that's done at any hour that's needed. Sometimes it's 2:00 in the morning, it's on a weekend, it's on a Saturday, it's on a Sunday. You never know when the next problem or threat is going to come to campus, but it's so important that it's done. Fraternity and sorority life is a unique aspect in general. I learned a lot. I didn't have a traditional undergraduate sorority experience myself, so I learned a lot coming into that space. And I learned about the various organizations, because you have your NPHC, your IFC, and then your Panhellenic organizations. And so they all taught me so much, but I will say they are some of the most hardworking students on campus, overly involved in so many things, but very happy to be part of a culture and an organization in which they feel connected to. And so how do I translate all that to my students? I try to bring a practitioner perspective. There's theory and there's the books and the textbooks and the articles, and we do all that, but really try talking to people about what would you do if you were the leader in this scenario, or you will be the leader someday. So how are you going to approach this scenario? I think social media gives us so much examples to work with nowadays. Like if this student said this thing on social media, how are you going to handle that as the next college administrator? Like talking about campus protests and encampments, and what's that going to look like when you're a leader, and how are you going to handle that on your campuses? So really just trying to pull from active examples and trying to incorporate that so that they're as prepared as possible.
Thank you so much. It's almost reminding me that you, in your book, The Disruptors, you're humanizing the community standards almost to transfer that accountability to the student. I love the what if scenario. So it's like an experiential learning, so to speak. So thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. This is an indication of all the things that you and I can always possibly talk about. What I wanted to chat with you about and ask you for perspective on is the role of the student today in some of the work that you're doing. They are becoming more vocal. They are less likely to just go with the tide, right? They really want to be those disruptors. They want to question, they want to learn, they want to be a part of advocacy and change. So how are you bringing them along with you for the journey? And where do you see them playing a key role in some of the changes that are meant to be coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think some of it depends on the student themselves. Not all students are interested in social justice issues and what's going on in the country, but a lot of them are. Statistically, Gen Z is more involved than I shouldn't say any generation, but since millennials before them and a little bit of Gen X before that. So they're just more involved in general, but they've also experienced a lot more lifing things than some of us have. When I was in K through 12, the only drills we had were fire drills. Like that was the only thing we ever practiced, right? Was the bus fire drill and then the in-school fire drill, right? And so nowadays they're having to do active shooter drills. They're having to deal with a lot more things than some of us have ever had to deal with. And so they're bringing that into the spaces. They're wanting to make a difference. And I think that's important to allow for those spaces. I mean, traditionally, college is supposed to be a free market of ideas where everyone can bring their ideas and talk about it and discuss those things. I think it's losing a little bit of the ability to openly discuss ideas in different ways and different ideas. I think that political divide we're seeing in the country has trickled onto college campuses. And so there is some apprehension with openly discussing ideas and being okay with people who think differently than you. And so for me as a professor, it's having those conversations in the classroom that may be uncomfortable, not being afraid to be like, okay, well, I'm uncomfortable as the educator talking about this, so I don't want to talk about it with my students because that would be a disservice to them. And so I usually bring things into a space with like, this is what we're going to talk about. If it makes you uncomfortable, there are different levels, different ways you can participate and still get credit. Depending on your comfort level or what you feel safe sharing in the space that we have. I am lucky that I teach in a program that is very diverse. So a lot of people come from different backgrounds, different cultures. And so everyone brings that in and we talk about things and we don't back down from those because it only makes us better students, graduates, professionals, people. I hope that addresses your question.
It does, and it's an acknowledgement of creating those safe spaces where they can have healthy discord, where you can model for them the different ways in which you can engage in these types of conversations, but not in a way that's like, we're not talking about this so much as let's find a way that we can talk about this and let's expose each other to the opportunity. And by creating that safe space, you invite that healthy dialogue that many of us need, because oftentimes it's those moments where we learn perspective from someone that we wouldn't otherwise have had that conversation with. So
yes.
Thank you for taking that as a responsibility in your role, because I think it is going to help shape the future for sure. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. T. I want to talk about leadership in higher education.
Yes, ma'am.
Just within the last 2 weeks, my alma mater, Winston-Salem State, named its first woman chancellor ever in the history of Winston-Salem State University. North Carolina Central just named Dr. Carrie Ditson as its chancellor. And so we are seeing an upward movement of women chancellors and presidents of colleges and universities. Yet there's still about 30% women who are leading colleges and universities. So we're seeing some progress, but it's slow. It's slow. And that's really across education. I'm in K-12 education. It's the same thing with superintendency. So it's the same thing. What do you attribute, first of all, to the increase, because we are seeing more women taking the helm as leaders and as deans, which is amazing. But how can we, first of all, what do you attribute to that? And then what do you, in your experience, think it will take to move it just a little further?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think we're seeing a lot more women come through graduate programs, getting doctorate degrees. And so I think that I always put value in a graduate education, and I think that goes a long way. I do think as women, we are trying to over prepare ourselves for roles. I think it's statistically known that women will not apply for certain positions unless they've met every single requirement on a job description, whereas our male counterparts may meet 50% of the requirements but are still willing to apply. So I think some of that is women just need to have more confidence in themselves. And I think you're starting to see that. I think women are starting to say, like, I'm going to trust myself and I'm going to do this for myself and I'm going to apply anyway. So maybe I don't meet every requirement that's on here, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so trying to keep up with that. I also think that there are more and more, if we talk about allies and sponsors out in the field that are willing to bring women along into conversations or to spaces that they previously may not have been in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Because sometimes we have other obligations. I know for myself, I had a family emergency with my daughter, and so I was out of the office for several months. And when I came back, I was able to pick up, but there were opportunities for me because my mentors and my supervisors had continued the work that I was doing and recognized, even in my absence, the work that I did. And so they were able to continue to say my name in those spaces and say, give me credit for the work that I had done rather than taking the credit for themselves.
I think that's so important. You hear gatekeeping, and that's really, I think, has been the barrier previously for advancement for women. It was, I want to get to the top, I'm not necessarily looking to help bring you to the top, but you're right. We are seeing that peel back some. And I think that it's to everyone's advantage. So I really appreciate that. We've got to stop gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Bring others along. So thank you for that.
I love this conversation because it's really not about, it's about women in higher education. But what you said was we want to be perfect. We want to make sure we cross those T's and dot all those I's, and just putting ourselves in those places where we need to be to move forward, I think is so important for all of us. But Mike, I'm bringing us back to the students, because what I like about the Gen Z is the fact that they're just different. We've all coalesced on that idea, but they seem to be the most unafraid people that I recognize. They're coming out. They're not letting us define who they are. They're telling us who they are, and they're getting mad if we don't agree with them. I mean, it's just a different generation. So what advice are you giving to these future leaders about where they are and what could possibly happen in the future? They're changing the world now, but as we know, the world keeps on changing and changing and changing.
I think, and so Dr. Porter, you mentioned, and so I'm at High Point University, and so we've had extraordinary change under our president for the last 20 years. And so one thing that I've learned and that I try to pass on is you have to embrace change. And that means at work, that means how the work is done. I think a lot of times in the past, there's been a certain order where it's seniority and this was the way it was done. And maybe once those people retire or move on and younger people take those roles, it changes a little bit and a little bit. But we're seeing in some places almost 4 or 5 different generations of people come together at the workplace. And so I think you have to expect change. I think AI is here. It's no longer this distant thing. AI is here. And so how are you embracing AI? We have that conversation all the time with some people that are hesitant to embrace it. I'm under the impression, and I talk to my students that, like, I want you to use it as a tool. I want you to familiarize it, because it's not going away. You can't put it back in the box and put it away and say, we're not ready for this, right? It's here. People are using it in everything. I mean, even if you log into Google and search something, AI usually Meta will do a little like summary for you, which I find so helpful. You just help me comb through like 50 web pages I don't have to do myself. So it is here, and it's about embracing it. I used to, someone asked me this question the other day because they turned one of the questions around on myself. And so one of my favorite words is yes. I think embracing and the ability to say yes, because we come from a society and so many people tell us no. So I think the ability to say yes, and that is part of embracing change, is how can we do this better? You've got a unique idea. Let's try it. I mean, 10 years ago, no one would have thought online learning, remote work would have been a thing. Having this podcast here where we're all in different states and time zones, like these were things that people thought would take years to get here, but we've embraced it along the way. And so I think change is going to happen faster. And so we have to be willing to adapt and say yes to it.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, especially on the AI. I'm not sure about the yes, because we women say yes too much, but I'll embrace it and see what happens. Thanks.
Fair enough.
Dr. Tara, embracing, yes. And all of the things that you've learned in your career. I remember the very first question was prompted for you personally. I want to ask you something personal. You did not speak up about something. And over the course of your career, can you share a particular moment or an accomplishment that stands out particularly meaningful to you before your students that you can think of right now in 2024 that has helped you in your journey in saying yes, or something that you would much rather do differently from this point forward?
Oh, that's a good question. So things that I'm particularly proud of. So I think I've talked about it, or I mentioned it briefly. So my daughter, she's 6, but 2 years ago when she was 4, she got really, really sick. She had a brain bleed and it caused a stroke. And so she lost use of her left arm and leg. And so that was really challenging. And I remember we first learned about her condition in 2020, and I went back to work. And I remember regretting that I didn't take more time to be home with her and to help her the first time through, because I just felt like I had to go back to work. I had to do this. I had to go back to my duties and kind of pick up where I left off. And so the second time around when she got sicker and had to have surgery, I remember telling my supervisor that I'm going to take as much time as I'm allowed. I'm going to take all the leave that you will give me, and I'm going to do it without any guilt. And that's what I ultimately did. And it was one of the best decisions. And it was hard. I think sometimes when you balance other life things, it can be really hard, particularly for women, because sometimes we are the primary XYZ, whether it's caregiver of our families, of our parents. Even if you're a dog or a cat mom, you're the one having to take them to the vet, right? You end up being that. And I'm lucky where I'm in a partnership that's pretty 50-50, but I still had that on my shoulders that I needed to do this. And so being able to advocate for myself and just say, like, I know I have these really cool opportunities and leadership opportunities if I come back to work, but I can't do that. And I can't be the person, let alone leader, employee, coworker that you need me to be right now. And so both for her health and my health, I had to step away. And so that was one of the things that, looking back, that I was able to most proud of, to be able to say, this is what I need right now, and take that time without any guilt.
This is why I love this podcast. This is purpose-driven leadership in its essence, because from our businesses, away from our students being mom, cat or mom, parents, this is the route that we take, that yes moment, when our heart tells us no, we step forward anyway. So I'm really proud of you. I also have 2 daughters, and I'm in a doctoral program right now, online. So
Yes.
this is really because it's a lot. And I applaud you and I thank you for, helping us get to that next step in our education. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, before I ask my question, I want to acknowledge you for that story because honestly, it's a really difficult thing to do. And you did it. And you did it in honor of yourself and in honor of your daughter and for your family. And I hope you have no regrets on that time and that choice because it sounds like it was the self-honoring choice, but also, exactly what your family needed at the time. And I think sometimes those are the things we have to do and hope that that is the right answer and just trust that it is. My thought goes back to your yes, right? Thinking about what we say yes to. And I remember hearing the first time when I think it's Shonda Rhimes that speaks of the year of yes. And the first time I met Dr. Porter was when I had made that decision that I would say yes and figure stuff out later, right? And so many beautiful things are on the other side of that. How do you encourage students to take on that mindset, to think about recognizing that you don't have to have it all figured out, but by saying yes, you're making your first choice, and then the choices you make after that come along? What does that sound like when you're thinking about explaining that or describing that or empowering a student to take on that philosophy?
Yeah. So I want to quantify saying yes, because I think saying yes is important. And I have said yes at the opportunities I think that scare me the most, and they've worked out the best. But I do want to recognize that as women, we say yes to everything and sometimes take too much on. So I do think there is somewhat of a balance, and there's a difference between saying yes to a lot of menial tasks, like, oh yeah, I'll be the note taker for this committee and I will do this for this committee, rather than saying yes to the big things that actually change your life or change the trajectory of your career. Because I truly believe in whatever spiritual path you're on. I feel like mine leads me down opportunities when there is a no, there is a yes coming down that I don't know about yet. So like I will continue. When my daughter got sick, I did go back to work after I took all the time I needed. I went back to work and I wasn't the same person going back anymore. And the job didn't feel right. And so I ended up walking away. I was an assistant vice president and I was like, I have to walk away. This doesn't feel right anymore. And so I walked away, and then not even 2 months later, the faculty side of the house called and said, we have this higher ed position in our doctorate program. Would you be interested? And so like that journey led me to another yes that I could say yes to, and wholeheartedly has given me so much experience, joy, laughter, the ability to connect with students on a different level. I love adult students. For me, that is my jam. I love adult students. They just bring so much to the table, their life experiences, their struggles, what they're going through. And I think in turn, my job is to push them to being able to say yes, or to apply for that scary job, or to apply to a major conference they've never known about, a national conference like NASPA. This past year, I was able to take 5 students with me to NASPA, 4 of which presented at a national conference. And I thought it was very impactful when all 5 women that I took were African-American students getting ready to graduate with their doctorate degree, right? So pushing them to be in those spaces and support them and be like, okay, send me your presentation at 10 o'clock at night. I'm going to look at it to make sure you're prepared for the next day, right? But to make sure that they're in situations where they could say yes, or when they're done with their dissertation work, like, hey, this was really good work. We need to publish it. We need to get your name out there. You need to continue that. So I think my job is to push them into uncomfortable spaces or spaces they wouldn't consider themselves. But for me personally, I have tried to say yes at things that scare me because they've worked out the best. So hopefully that answers your question.
I think it's a yes to you oftentimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love the idea of the yes, the no leaves space for something else.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Wow. All I can say is, wow. I don't know how we do it, but every week we top ourselves with amazing yes. So I really just want to say thank you for taking the time to share all of your expertise, your knowledge, your passion with us. And we want to give you this space to share with our audience where they can connect with you, where they can follow you, where they can purchase your books, all of the good things that you have to offer.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed this. It's kind of weird being on the other side because I've been doing interviews for my book since January. So like I've been interviewing people. And so it's different to kind of be able to share my own experiences because I've had the privilege of just being a listener for the last 5 months. And so, yeah, you can find me, I guess online on Instagram. I'm there under, well, for writing, I write fiction books under TS Krupa, that KRUPA. So that's my social media handles are all related to that. But hopefully you can also email me of any interest, especially if there's anyone out there that's still interested in being part of this study. And so, yeah, I just invite people to connect. I think, as I was talking about, yes, me being on this podcast wouldn't have happened if we just, Dawn and I hadn't struck up a conversation. We were complete strangers who just happened to have a good conversation and then reconnect a year later, both doing different things in life. And so, again, putting yourself out there and networking. And I know as an introvert, it can be scary. So I guess my only advice that I would leave everybody with is that it's okay to be scared and to try new things. And sometimes it's as simple as just telling someone, what's your story? Why don't you tell me about yourself? And that they can talk about themselves and you can figure out where to kind of insert yourself into that conversation. Because you have to start somewhere. Because as I said in the beginning, it's not always going to come to you. I think Hollywood has given us this idea that things just fall into your lap and if you're just in the right place at the right time, but really you have to go out and find your own opportunities. And so don't be afraid to do that.
Again, I want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing all of your information. We really appreciate it. I think we all really got something out of it, and I know our audience did as well. And to our audience, we want to thank you as well for joining us for another episode of Leading with Purpose podcast. Again, I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter.
I am Aisha Bihoy.
I am Janelle Taylor.
And I'm Dawn Bornheimer. As you navigate your journey with leadership, just remember that it is not just a philosophy, but a commitment to making a positive impact.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your network. And don't forget to subscribe so you will never miss an opportunity to explore the intersection of leadership and purpose.
And remember, continue to lead, empower, inspire, and achieve.
And until next time, lead with passion, lead with positive intention, and by all means, continue to lead with purpose. Thank you for joining the Leading with Purpose podcast. Please join us every Monday for a new episode.